I'm Sean Ramsey. I'm a professor here in the Animal Science Department. And on behalf of the Animal Science Department and the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, we're glad to bring this information to you today on shearing lambs. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the ins and outs and the basics of shearing your lamb for these stock shows. And so when you get questions, send them out to Dottie, and we'd be glad to get the answers to you. Again, share all of these and then reach out and like and comment. Let us know where you're watching from. We had a great response last week. I think we had almost 200, a little over 200 watching last week when we talked about what to do on your new lambs. And so we're kind of fast forwarding this week to doing a shearing program. And then we'll be back with you next week about working and getting your lambs halter broke and trained now that hopefully a lot of you guys are getting some lambs on feed. So do we have some people that are commenting, Dottie?
Yeah, we do, Dr. Ramsey. We have folks watching with us from Hereford, Texas, Archer County, Texas, Austin County, Texas, even I think some folks from California and near the Arizona border. So even in Victoria and Zavala County. So folks from all over the state and nation are joining in with us. And I'm really glad they are, because I know that this week is going to be a really informative week and a great session over shearing. So let's get started.
All right. Well, we have our Lister stablemate clippers here. Pretty common that you'll see at all the shows. There's lots of different types of clippers that come and go. These are all good types of equipment. This is a Lister Legend that we're going to be using today. You know, depending on the size of your shearer, how many you're going to be shearing. I like these Lister Legends. They've got a little more power, but they're a little heavier. These stablemate clippers, if you can find a used pair of these, work great. I really like these. They don't turn at quite the RPMs, but they're very lightweight. And so if you're shearing lots of sheep or have a little exhibitor that's learning how to shear, these are excellent choices. So today we're going to talk about choosing blades, and we've got different types of blades. I'm going to try to get where we can see these. And so the first type of blade that we're going to talk about is a fine. Okay. In this blade, the dimensions on the blade are all the same. The only difference in what you want to look for is you see this little F over here. Okay. That stands for fine. Versus this one has an S for surgical. And the difference that you're going to see is the thickness. Okay. And so the surgicals are going to be a little thicker, or excuse me, a little thinner than the fines. And all of this is going to be determined by how new these blades are. Anytime you get them sharpened, it's going to wear them down. All right. So how do we put them on? And this is one of those deals for you guys that come and participate in our sheep skillathon at San Antonio and State Fair. This is one of those hands-on activities that we always like to put in there. And you would think, hey, everybody's going to get this one right, but they don't. Okay. So the bottom part of our blade, okay, this is called a comb, C-O-M-B, okay, and it has a smooth, shiny side, and then a side over here that's dull that has ridges. Okay, you guys seeing that okay? This is a comb. This is the cutter. The cutter goes on top of the comb and goes back and forth, and that's what's doing the cutting, all right? And so as we go through here and we talk about differences on these type of equipment, it's pretty much automatic where the tools line up. And so as we sharpen these, they start to wear down. And so one thing that we're going to talk about today is putting the proper fit. So a couple more parts that we're going to have. This is our retaining screw. We have a retaining tension nut and our spring, tension spring. And so as we go through here, the first part that we're going to put on, we have a little roller ball right here that makes our blades go back and forth. We're going to put our comb, or excuse me, our cutter on first, okay? It just fits right here in these tracks. Now these little grooves in our head, these little pieces of plastic are going to fit down in this track on the roller bearing. the two shiny sides go together, okay? And so we're going to take, we've got our cutter on, we're going to take our comb, turn it over where the two smooth sides, we have two retaining screws right here that hold our comb in place. Once we get them on there, and they only go on one way, we're going to put our bolt through there, and a lot of times you have to give it a little turn so it seats in here smooth. Hold it in with your thumb, put our tension spring on, and then our tension nut, and we're going to crank it down. And so this is a common mistake that I often see is you crank it down all the way, and it has a little guide. It's got a little ridge right here. And on this guide, okay, we're going to go all the way down till it's tight. And here's my guide. And we're going to go one full turn and a half a turn. That has your proper tension set on our blades. Okay, so one thing I want you to notice on these, this is an old set. Okay, the comb is still good. My cutter is wore out. And so where the cutter comes, okay, that is going to determine the length of wool that I'm going to cut on the depth of the comb. And so if y'all want to come over here, if you'll bring the iPad over here and we'll get a picture of this. What I want you to see is where the cutter, proper alignment here on our cutter. The cutter is at the very ends of the teeth. There's only about a 1/16 to an 1/8 inch here on the end of, from the cutter to the end of the comb, versus this set, and it'll still cut, but it's a lot harder and it won't get the animal smooth. And I see this very often. Here's the end of our comb, here's the end of our cutter. We have almost a 1/4 inch. And so if we're trying to get this lamb really smooth and close, right here is where our cutter is going to cut, and this determines the length of our wool. This is going to be very long and fuzzy. So a lot of people may ask Dottie, here's our one that has the proper alignment on it. Our cutter is very close to the edge. Now we don't want it all the way to the edge. We want it back about a 1/16 of an inch, okay? 1/16 to an 1/8. But this would be proper setup on your blades. All right, so once we get our blades and everything ready to go, how do I know what type of blade I want to use? Well, a surgical is just like what it says. A surgical blade is going to cut very, very close to the skin. And so depending on, most of our medium wool breeds like to use surgicals. Number one, it makes those lambs feel harder. And it's all personal preference, but it's oftentimes there's an extra day in there. And so we're going to pretend like today is Wednesday. We're getting ready to go to a stock show tomorrow. So I'm going to shear that lamb tonight. And so I like to use a fine on fine wools, crosses, and South Downs. And once again, it's all personal preference on what you want to use. Okay, I don't necessarily like to use surgicals on fine wools just because they look too pink and gets them too close. But my favorite is a fine. Normally, we're going to be showing South Downs, so I'm going to shear him tonight. We're going to put him on the trailer. We're going to go to the stock show. We're going to get there in the morning. We're going to show tomorrow. Okay, so a day later. And so as we go through here, that's a very quick turnaround. I don't have to worry about a lot of wool growing back. If I'm showing a medium wool, I have an extra day in there, and so that wool can get just a little puffy. So we got any questions on clipper blades or anything, Dottie? We're going to keep going, so if they do, they can type those in as we go through here and start shearing. So we've got our lamb on our blocking table, okay? So the first thing we're going to do, I've got my blades. These are fines. I've got them set correctly in terms of where my cutter and my comb line up. I don't have a lot of adjustment in there, so there's only one way to put them on, all right? And so if they're not right, that means probably your cutter is worn out. So you may have to get a new cutter. If I don't know for sure how this lamb is going to look, I want to make sure my blades are sharp and are going to cut. I always want to start over here on the non-show side on his belly. That way, for some reason, if my blades don't cut, then nobody can see it. Or if I start with a fine and I think, I want to try a surgical on this guy, I can try it over here and it's not evidenced. Once I like how my blades are cutting, then I like to start here on the top. And so the first thing I'm going to do is make a long, smooth pass. And what I want you to notice is what my left hand is doing, okay? One thing that I forgot to do, I sheared part of it a while ago, I always want to have a good lubricant available. And so when I start, I'm going to use some type of oil. I'm going to go ahead and oil my blades. It's always good to have a rag. We want to keep these lambs clean. I'll normally oil them that first time, get started, and then every few of Extend-A-Lube, Sullivan's, Weavers make lots of good products like this. Don't use WD-40, okay? That's a big mistake that people want to use WD-40, and it actually makes the blades get dull, all right? Your left hand always has a job. We want to pull the hide and keep that lamb's skin as tight and smooth as possible. When I shear, I don't want to fill up the whole comb. I only want to fill up to about 7/8 of my comb. That way I don't leave any lines on the edges. And if I do leave a line or a short spot, I'm going to go back and get it right then. It's a lot easier to get them smooth the first time, and that's why it's important to take long, smooth strokes that overlap as you go down. All right, another common mistake that I see is people try to shear flat. When they hold these clippers, they hold them like this, and they think that's the proper angle. But if you notice, these blades have to sit flat, and then our blades have a bevel on the end of them. And so the proper angle of our clippers is actually needs to be about a 45-degree angle to that sheet in order for the skin and everything to flow smoothly and to get them as close as we can, determining by our comb size. All right. So we're going to get a 45-degree angle. We're going to keep our hands flat and run this down the lamb's back. You'll notice our lamb is also washed. It's very important. If you're going to shear one of these guys, you have to wash them. Otherwise, the lanolin and the dirt in this will gum up these teeth and you won't be able to shear them. Plus, you'll go through lots of different blades. Okay, it makes them dull very fast. If you only wash these lambs and only shear lambs that are washed, you ought to be able to do 8 to 10 lambs per set of blades, or maybe even more. Okay, so we're going to go. We've got any questions come in? Let's hear them.
Yeah, Dr. Ramsey, we have lots of folks watching and good questions coming in. So really appreciate the folks engaging with us and watching today. One question we have is, you mentioned that you should wash the sheep. So we see that that one's clean. What about drying?
Good question, Dottie. So this lamb has been dry. We like to blow dry these guys, but I like to shear them when they're still just a little bit damp. If you let them get totally dry, the wool doesn't flow through. These teeth in the comb are very close together. So I like to shear them. If I run my hand over them, I feel just a little bit of wetness still on my hand. So I like to shear them when they're just a little bit damp. I think it gets them smoother and it comes off a lot easier. That's a great question.
Sure. Dr. Ramsey, one more kind of along those same lines. You mentioned that if the sheep are dirty or something like that, that your clippers could get bad quicker. You also mentioned earlier that one of the pieces you were working with earlier at the table was getting dull or old. How do you know when, your cutter or your blade is getting old?
That's a good question. So we'll go back these clippers. So every time I sharpen these blades, I'm going to wear them off. Okay. And so if you see where my cutter lines up on my comb, I've got probably 1/4 of an inch. Where'd my pen go? I've got about 1/4 of an inch, okay, from the end of my cutter to the top of my comb. This comb is still good. The cutter is starting to wear out. In relationship to this set, see how close the cutter is to my top comb. Okay? This set would be correctly. And so what I've had to do, my cutter is worn out. Now I bought a new cutter to put on here and I'm ready to go again. Because the end where that cutter meets your comb, this little area right here determines the thickness or how much wool you leave on the lamb. Okay, good questions.
Very good. Dr. Ramsey, we have folks asking about, washing before you clip. Do you have any favorite product, or does it really matter the type of product that you wash with before you clip?
The products that I like to use before I clip, let's shine back over here. It just depends. If we are going to a jackpot show, I'm going to use some type of antifungal shampoo just to put more protection on those sheep. If I'm just shearing at home and we're not going anywhere, any kind of shampoo, mild shampoo that you use on yourself, just any kind of shampoo will work fine. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. You want to be careful of any hard type of dishwasher or dish detergents. Dawn works really good, or Ivory. Those are a little more mild. That's not going to dry out the skin, but we're always going to protect the skin when we get finished. Okay, and we're going to do that in just a minute. So any kind of soap works. The main thing, if you're going to be jackpotting and going to a jackpot show, I would recommend some type of antifungal shampoo.
Great. Thanks for expanding on that, Dr. Ramsey. No more questions at this time, but thanks everybody for watching, and keep those questions coming. Let's get back to shearing.
All right, so we're going to go back to our lamb. We've washed him. We've got our blade set. We've got a set of fines on here. We've checked where the comb and the cutter meet. We've got them on correctly. Now we're going to start shearing him. So I'm going to go a little faster. If you've got any questions as I go through here, I probably won't be able to hear you, but the old guys will wave at me. Again, we're going to start and shear this lamb on this side. So the big thing to notice is how I keep my 45-degree angle down on my clippers with a little downward pressure. And the main thing that I want to do is keep that hide tight so I get it smooth, okay? And I'm just going to continue to come down the side, long, smooth strokes. That is the key to making one smooth. You don't want to stop. If that lamb starts to moving around, you can get a helper to come in and lift up a front leg. I'm also putting a little pressure on him with my knee. And that bends his middle out. Okay, so there he looks pretty good, right? I always like to stop and leave a little bit because I'm going to do some blending here. I'm going to do some blending right here. But here's one thing that I want to show you is once I get to this stage, we never want to shear from the hock down. We're going to shear on the inside. We're going to leave some wool on the outside. Again, this personal preference. We're going to make sure a little spray there to keep our blades cool because that's one thing that makes those lambs jump. I'm going to start right here on top of the hock. So you notice he's wanting to take a step, okay? So when he does that, I've got Emma Kaufman in here, a student here at Texas A&M, was show lamb, did lots of that showing when she was in high school. So she's a great hand to have here. She's going to hold up the front leg. I will grab on the inside of this flank right here and squeeze that muscle right there on that knuckle joint. And if I do that, that will kind of help prohibit him from taking a step forward, all right? And so I can blend. Okay, and we talk about little attention to details. That looks really smooth, and a lot of people will stop just like that. Here's the problem. If I run my hands over them, I can feel some of these little swirl patterns that we get in these lambs. Right now, it's fine and looks really smooth, okay? But if this is a medium wool and he's not going to go into the show ring for another 2.5 days, by the time I wash him again a couple of different times and rinse him when we go to the show, he's going to have lots of little stubble all over him, and he's not going to look smooth and he's not going to feel smooth. So what I like to do is come back and I'm going to go once again at a different angle, okay? Here on the britch, we'll talk about this in terms of classification. This is really important if you've got fine wools and fine wool crosses to get this really smooth, because this is an area the classifiers are going to rub on and feel up to feel if it feels smooth. So we want to make sure and get this extra close. I'm going to come up at an angle, and you will see just by changing the angle and the direction because of that wool pattern, I'm cutting more wool off. And so if I don't do this, by the time he goes in the show ring in 2 days, okay, he's going to have a lot of fuzz sticking up. So as I come up here on the side, I'm going to go at an angle. And what I want you to do is as we go through here, I'll get him to zoom in just a little bit. He looks really smooth right here, but watch how much more wool is going to come off. And I'm going to go all the way up. And so just that little pass, now I can rub my hands back over this and it all feels consistent. It's all super smooth. But you can see, I'll kind of roll down. That's how much wool came off of just that side, even though we'd already gone over it once. And it's how that wool, different wool patterns grow. Now I don't have to worry about them being fuzzy here in 2.5 days when I wash him again and fluff him up, okay? So we're going to go ahead and finish the belly. Now, one trick of getting right here is very simple, okay? Just hold that front leg up. All right, so we've got the body, we've gone over it the first time lengthwise, then we've come back at a different angle to get anything, because these wool fibers, especially on these medium wools, grow different directions, especially back here on our britch. Okay. Now we look at the rules. It says everything has to be sheared slick all the way over the animal's body. So we don't want to leave wool back here on the belly. We want to shear slick all the way down to this knee, but we don't want our boot wool to look like a chili bowl type of haircut. So when we get down to right about here, I'm going to start feathering that cut out, right? So I'm going to try to get it over here on the side. Don't worry about if you have to go over it a couple different times. That's not a problem. All right, so right here, I've gotten down to my boot. And I'm going to start blending this in. As I come down, I'm going to turn my clippers up. And blend that area in. So as we go up the neck, again, we're going to go back all the way up to the top. And so one thing about these kind of clippers that we're using, excuse me, is they're very safe. Let the kids shear these guys. If we're going to a jackpot show, that's the best thing that we can do. Is good training for these lambs to get them up there and shear them, especially in the summer months. I don't like to let those lambs get more than about a ½ inch of wool on them. That a ½ inch of wool, if I've got fans blowing on them, will help keep them cool. That wool acts as an insulator. A sheep sweats, and so their body acts like an evaporative cooler. The problem, if I'm in College Station, Texas, or somewhere that's high humidity, evaporative coolers don't work very good. So we tend to want to keep those lambs shorn a little slicker, okay? And so you can see I've blended it in. We're going to come back and do our boot wool. Dottie, how we're doing out there? We got any questions? Anybody have a comment or anything before I get started again?
Dr. Ramsey, we're all just really enjoying this and can't wait to see and learn about shearing the rest of the lamb. But real quick, someone's interested in your favorite brand of clippers.
My favorite brand of clippers. And so I'm normally shearing quite a few. So I like these Lister Legends. They're a little heavier duty and they cut a lot faster, a lot higher RPMs. Now you have to make sure and keep them lubed well, because if not, they tend to get hot. Grab those yellow stablemates over there. These stablemates, though, if you can find them, work really good. They don't cut quite as, and so if y'all can hear this, I'm going to turn them on and let you listen to the differences in RPMs. That's the Legends. And so there's a pretty big difference in the turning, how fast that cutter is moving across there. So these work great. They're a lot lighter. And so if you're shearing a lot, have little smaller exhibitors that are just learning, they may like these a little better. You know, if we're shearing a lot of sheep and I'm trying to get done with them, these just have a little more power. It's all personal preference. They all take the same blades, okay? The blades are what make the difference in terms of a surgical, a fine, or whichever one that you're going to use. So those are a couple little tricky spots that are real easy to get. We're going to get this little spot right here that I missed. We're going to look over this lamb. I'm going to rub my hands over him, and everything feels super smooth. I can't feel any little ridges like I could a while ago. And so I want to make sure it's like going out somewhere special. You're going to get all dressed up. You're not going to get all dressed up and then not get a good haircut or not have your hair done right. And so you want to make sure everything looks good, because that's all part of it. When we start doing boots, I can shear the body very quickly. I'm going to spend a lot of time doing the boots, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on the head, especially if I'm doing a South Down or one of those breeds that we look more in terms of his head, in terms of breed characteristics. So we're going to talk about that. Any more questions, Dottie? Those are good ones.
No questions here, Dr. Ramsey, but real quick while I'm here, just want to remind everybody to keep liking and sharing the post. And with that, let's share the rest of this lamb, Dr.
All
Ramsey.
right, so we're going to go ahead and do the lamb. His head, I like to do as much of it as I can with him on the blocking table, okay? So I'm going to come up here on the side. And I'm going to get a hold of his head. So by holding his head up at an angle like this, he can't really move and fight me quite as bad. Now I'm not going to shear the whole ear, like we did on the boots. I'm going to come right here and blend it in. One thing you want to remember is you want to watch out for these metal parts on the blocking table, because if you hit them with these clippers, you're probably going to break a tooth. And if you break a tooth, then your combs are pretty much shot. If you take care of these clippers have probably shorn countless sheep. They're probably somewhere around 10 years old. We easily shear 100 plus lambs a year with these. So you keep them oiled, keep them lubed, they'll run for a long time. Okay, now I pretty much got him all over on that side. We'll finish up this side real quick. And so just a couple little tricks. Right here, this lamb's very tight-hided, but we got some little wrinkles right here. And so if you're like me and got short legs and hard to straddle these guys, once you get them down, just put your knee right here and lift up on him, and that'll stretch his neck, and I don't have to get him off the table. So one thing, if we're going to a jackpot show and we're shearing these guys, how does a ringworm as a fungus, how does that get in our skin? Well, if we get razor burn in our skin, so we use the antifungal shampoo. When we go to jackpot shows, one of the areas that I'm going to make sure I wash and clean good and treat is right here on that neck, right here in this foreflank area, and right here under their chin. Those three areas are areas that are going to get razor burn because I've got wrinkles right there. Even though I don't draw blood, you can't hardly see it, I'm going to make the skin have an issue, okay? And when I do that, that gives that fungus ringworm time to get in the body. So I want to make sure and treat this, okay? So we're going to finish up here on the front end. I've got my neck area, and then I'm going to loosen just a little bit. And I can drop this down. So I've still got him caught, okay? And now I can get back up here. and finish shearing the head because I don't have to worry about hitting the side of my blocking table. Time, especially in South Downs and fine wolves, because those breeds have some chalky white hair, and if you don't get that off of there, there's a good chance that you're going to have a problem with the classifier. So we got his head, and when we get done, we're going to make sure and put some type of skin conditioner back on him. So I can get this whole animal and never really have to take him off the blocking table. Now again, it's personal preference. Some people like to leave the ears a little fuzzy. I like to blend them in. I don't like anything to stand out or take attention away from the composition and the quality of the lamb. So you can raise that head up with my elbow. Then again on these ears, I'm just going to kind of blend in to the rest of the body. So you can't see it on this lamb. He's a medium wool. He's a Hampshire. Okay. And if I've got South Downs or fine wools right in this little area right here, we get a lot of chalky hair. And so it's critical. And I see it all the time when I'm classifying lambs at major shows, judging shows, or helping people. They don't spend enough time on the head. And so I want to make sure and get all of that chalky hair out of that area. And I want to do this if I've got a fine wool or a cross or a South Down. I'm going to shear them a few times to see what they look like. And so if I've got a South Down that maybe needs to his muzzle to look a little wider, okay? So instead of going down this direction, I will come up, and that'll leave just a little more wool. I might shear his head 3 to 4 days before I shear the rest of his body to get just a little more wool growth right back here on the bridge of his nose if I have a South Down that's a little bit narrow, all right? The other thing, depending on muzzle color and on South Downs and fine wools, is you want to get all of that chalky hair out of there. I like to get all of that chalky hair off the ears. And so on medium wools, it doesn't really matter, but in fine wools and our downs, ear shape, how they tie to their head is also important. So a lot of times I will take my clippers, and on these blacks, you can't see it, but I've got all these little long hairs. And on fine wools and South Downs and crosses, these little long hairs are normally chalky and white, and that's not a good breed, a good thing about a breed. So I'm going to take my clippers and just kind of go right in there. And you can even back drag so you don't have to worry about cutting them. And I'm going to take and shape those long stray hairs on my off breeds, like a South Down especially, okay? Now, we've got him pretty good. I'm going to go through here. I did his front leg. We blended it in. I kind of have a little ridge right here. And this is where I'm going to come and go ahead and raise him up just a little bit for me, Emma. So we've got this guy's boots. Somebody worked really hard getting these boots all grown up. So I want these guys standing like they're going to be standing in the arena when I do his boots. I'm going to trim out really good on the inside. So you can see I've taken a lot of the wool out here. It's very simple. You put your hand and push in, and that will allow you to get them very close. We want to give the appearance of that lamb being wide, okay? And so again, this is personal preference. I like to take a lot of that out on the inside. Now on the outside, I like to blend this area in, okay? So I'm gonna come down, we're gonna draw a couple imaginary lines. I'm gonna get his legs set where I want them. I'm gonna make sure he's got his weight on him. And if I've got any problems with this lamb, that way I can see, here's the angle of my leg bone coming down right here, okay? It ties into this joint, and I want to see it straight down. Now, the trend is to have lots of big bushy boot wool, and that's fine, but I don't want anything to detract from the quality and the structural correctness of my lamb. And anything that I can do to enhance that, I'm going to do. I like to leave a little bit of wool right here. So I'm going to lay my clippers flat, and I'm going to blend this in this area coming off this hop. Now I'm going to draw an imaginary line. So I've got to come down, and I have my correct angle right here on that leg, and I'm going to take a little bit of that off. And then again, I always like to blend that coming down. Now, I like to kind of pull these boots down just a little bit, and I'm going to come in here and make my line now. I've got my lines pretty good coming down here. And now I'm going to go around here to the back side, and I can see that I need to take a little bit off here, and I've got him where it looks like his hock can leg bow out just a little bit, okay? And so once again, we're going to make sure and keep our clippers lubed. If we don't, they get hot. So I'm going to get right here. Here's my leg bone coming down, and I want this to be straight. If you got a lamb that's crooked legged, so let's say his hocks are out just a little bit, then I may want to take a little bit more off my inside and leave it longer on the outside. A good judge is going to see it, but it's just an optical illusion when you get them there on the brace and they're just looking at him. That's why you see a lot of our judges walking them more. Okay? And so on this guy, I'm going to take just a little bit off to give him appearance of being a little wider on the inside. And then I'm just going to come and smooth this down. And so now you can see the difference in the leg that's been fit, yes, and the leg that hasn't. I can shear the whole body in probably 5 minutes or so. I'm going to spend probably 20 minutes doing boots, and I'm probably going to spend 5 to 10 minutes on their head, because that's like baking a cake and not putting icing on the cake. And so these are the things that we want to do to make all the boots look pretty. And this again is personal preference, but you can see how everything flows. Okay, I like big boots, but I like them to flow. I don't like them to be obnoxious. I don't like them to detract from the animal. And so I think everything needs to flow as we go through there. Now, the same thing that we did on the back legs, we're going to do on the front legs. Okay, and so he doesn't have a lot of wool here on the front, so primarily we're just going to kind of get the wild ends off. And once again, we want to make it where it flows and everything balances. So everything's going to blend in nicely. I'm going to come around here to the front. And the same thing on these, depending on how his bone work is, I may take a little bit more off the inside. And so this is a good look. You can kind of see the before and after. Another thing that I like to do is this whole long hair on their toes. I like to clean that up. And it just makes them look a little nicer. All I'm going to do is just kind of get the ends of it. I don't want to shear it slick and make it real smooth. I just want to get the wild hairs that are sticking up. Now, you can see, if we get back to this angle, I need to take a little bit more because it looks like this lamb. Let's move the camera right back over here. If you can see that, it looks like he wants to bow his knee just a little bit, okay? And so what I'm going to do right here is just come off a little bit straighter, and that fixes that problem right there, okay? Questions, Dottie? We got him in pretty good shape right here.
Yeah, he looks great, Dr. Ramsey, and you said something that I think we can all relate to during quarantine, and that's getting those wild ends off. I know I'm ready. So we do have a question related to up near the ears. Folks are interested in if you just get the edges off or if you actually clip the whole ear. Can you explain that a little more?
Sure. So when I get right here on the ear, I'm going to blend in. If I get up here, you know, make it any easier to see. Again, on these hamp lambs that are real fluffy ears, I like that, but I'm going to blend it in. I don't like seeing like a chili bowl haircut right here. I want to blend it in where it looks real natural. And I'm just going to kind of come down here at the head, and especially on South Downs. I don't know why, and it goes back to some of the breeding sheep. People think they need to leave these big old puff balls on the ears of a South Down. If you read the rules, that is illegal. And so I know the stock shows have made a big deal out of it for this coming year. That's not going to be a positive thing. So you need to shear the ears on those South Downs. You don't have to shear them slick, but you ought to just blend it in right here. And then as far as these wild hairs on the end, especially on our South Downs, fine wools, and crosses, that tends to be some of that chalky hair that is not a good breed characteristic. And so what I'm going to do is take my clippers and go backwards, back drag down that ear and get those wild long hairs off, and especially right here in that eye channel. Now, if you have a problem with that chalky kind of wool, this is an old grill brick. You can buy them at most of the feed stores or livestock supplies. We used to use them on pigs years ago, but it works very good of getting that chalky hair tamed down right here around their eyes. And so if this was a South Down, I could come in here and do this down on his muzzle, and that helps get rid of that chalky white hair in my fine wools and my South Downs and my crosses. It works really good right here. So we've got him done. We're at a show, and here's one thing that we always worried about when you get to a show and your lamb reacts to something and you don't know what it is. These guys have been out in the country. They've never had wash water that has high chlorine or fluorine levels in it, fluoride. So I always like to take one of these filters when I go to the wash rack, okay? Now, our livestock supplies do a great job, but sometimes, you know, I'm not sure what happens, but you can get something in that lamb that you've used the same product, but he has a reaction to it. And so one thing that I like to keep in my box is this Aveeno eczema treatment for babies. And so if you do get a lamb that breaks out in a rash, we used to think it was the shavings at Houston. I think it's other things, but it's going to happen to you if you show sheep. At some point, you're going to have a lamb that has a skin reaction. Take some of that, put it in water and smooth it all over him, and that will take that redness and swelling out. It works really good. Now, one other thing, if we've got time for a couple questions here coming up, so be thinking about those. We need to trim his feet. Now, this isn't something that you do the day before you go to a livestock show. You need to trim feet on these guys about once every 3 to 4 weeks. depending on if they've got problems. This sheep is really good on his feet and legs. So, but just like your fingernails, they're going to grow. Okay. And so when I have him on a blocking table is a great time to do this. Can you get in here and zoom in? I don't know if we can see this, but we talk about, just like our fingernails, this part of the hoof wall that is over the edge. And if I run my fingers across, I can feel that edge right there. That is what I want to cut off. Okay. And so it's very simple. I lay my blades down flat. I just make little cuts because it's a whole lot easier to come back. And I want to do this a week or so before I'm going to a major show, because if I quick him, then he has time to get over it. Now, just a little bit off of this heel. I like to leave a lot of that on lambs. That makes them stand up on their toes. You can see this guy's toes a lot longer. So we're going to cut. And so once I get the big part cut off, I like to use, this is just a little sheetrock rasp. And that way, if I need to do any shaping, I can. I'm going to put him down. And then so if you look on the front of this guy, you come around here to the front, you can see that inside toe is turning out. That means it's still just a little bit longer, right? So what I want to do, and when I've got him standing up on this blocking table, is a great place because I've got a flat surface. So I'm going to take his foot now, and I'm going to pull it back up, knowing that that inside needs a little more off of it. And that's where I can use my rasp. And so now we're a lot better right there. That's got his toe straight. All right, so I've got my feet done. We're getting close, Dottie. We got any questions coming in on show products? I've got this lamb. I've washed him, and we washed all the lanolin out of him. The lanolin is the natural antibiotic, if you will, or protectant of this lamb's skin. And so we're going to put another product on there. There's lots of them out there that they make. I like mane and tail. And if he's dried out, you can either take this and just put some in your hand, or you can mix some up in some water. And we're just going to rub this all back into that skin to condition it. And remember, we're especially going to get it up here on these wrinkles right here in that forerib and up under his chin, because that's what's going to help protect him from getting ringworm. All right. So I also have some mixed up in some water. If you like doing that better, makes it a little easier to spray on there. And I'm going to put a pretty good little coat on here and rub this all in to make sure that hide stays good. And all that has to do, and I spend a lot of time treating this hide because all of our judges like these lambs to touch good. And so keeping that moisture, keeping that hide is very important. So we've done a lot of time on our boots. Also going to spray a little of this on our boots. And then this guy is ready to go. How we doing, Dottie?
Dr. Ramsey, we're doing great. We've gotten lots of tips and great visuals from you, so I appreciate that. We're wrapping up our time together, but I do want to ask real quick for just any last-minute questions from the folks watching with us today. One question we had come in does have to do with that leg wool. That's all the craze right now. And the question has to do with your opinion or, just what you think about wrapping leg wool, and if, depending on what you think about it, what would be the best time and method for doing so?
So on the leg wool, in this day and time, we like these big fluffy boots. Number one, you have to buy a lamb that has that capable of growing that type of boot wool. If they don't have it genetically, you're not going to do anything to get it. I think wrapping them can help protect it, especially on these medium wools. One of the big things is make sure those lambs aren't picking themselves, all right? We have to keep plenty of fiber in their diet. I think on our medium wools, this boot wool has a lot more hair and a lot more fiber produced from a primary follicle versus a secondary follicle. When we talk about where does wool come from, we have primary and secondary top follicles. And so in our fine wools and crossbreds, they have a greater proportion of secondary follicles that produce a true wool fiber, right? Our medium wools have more primary follicles, which produce a larger fiber, bigger in diameter, but there's not as many of them. And I think wrapping those protects it. Now, if you have the time and the facilities, I think you can wrap it, but you need to make sure that you're taking those wraps off every other day and rinsing and blowing them out, because if you don't, one of the natural great properties of wool is called felting. And so felting is like a felt hat, felt pads for brake shoes, piano keys, tennis balls. Those are called felt products. And felt is when we take wool, heat, and moisture and wrap them together under pressure, makes felt. So if you just put those leg wrap on and leave them on there and it's in the summer, high humidity, you're going to take them off and you're going to have a one dense wool felt product on your boot wool, and then it's going to fall out and you're not going to have anything. I think on our fine wools and our South Downs, if they have good boot wool, you know, as long as you can protect it, if they're by themselves wrapping it, you know, they have to be able to grow that wool naturally. Okay. And so whatever you need to do to protect it, you know, we've got sheep that had huge boots like this. In our South Downs, we never wrapped them, but they were protected. We kept them out of the mud. We kept them clean, and they didn't have anybody in there that was picking wool. And that's one of the big things. They just get bored and chew on each other. And so whatever you need to do to protect those, that's what you need to do. Good question, though.
Yeah, Dr. Ramsey, that was a great explanation. And I don't think any of us were prepared for the scientific breakdown of leg wool, but I sure appreciate it, as we know that it's certainly a big topic right now and a trend that everyone's interested in.
Well, you see lots of products out there, Dottie, that you know, promise you they're going to grow wool and grow lots of shag and lots of wool. I tell you, if all those product works, we wouldn't have a bald-headed man in America. And so, you know, right. I think it helps condition them. I think conditioning, if you think about it, the same type of way that we think about our hair, shampoo, keeping it clean, keeping conditioner on it, makes that hair stronger, keeps it from breaking. Okay. It's not going to necessarily make it grow more. And I think that's how you grow bigger and better boot wool. Great question, though.
Dr. Ramsey, this week has really been great, and you've showed us some really good tips and tricks for shearing these lambs, and your thoughts on clippers and blades and you know, maintaining your equipment and things like that. So we really appreciate that. Before we end today, I want to remind folks of a few things. One of those being that you've done several sessions so far, and really good ones at that. You've talked about feed nutrition, about some medication. You've talked about selection. And all of those can be found on our Facebook page at Texas Youth Livestock and Ag, and can also be found on our website at Texas Youth Livestock and Agriculture, or sorry, TexasYouthLivestock.com. rather. So encourage you to look for those and brush up on some of those other topics that Dr. Ramsey has talked about. Also would encourage you to share this post, because the more you share it, the more folks get to see it and learn right along with us. So just want to remind you of some of those things. Also want to talk about, Dr. Ramsey, something that you've alluded to several times during our time together today, and that's classification, and how important it is that we know and understand those classification rules. And so something that we have coming up that I want everyone to be aware of is our Texas Lamb Classification Guideline training. And that's coming
Tuesday.
Yeah, it's coming up Tuesday. It'll be from 4 to 6 p.m. And it's going to be right here on Facebook Live at Texas Youth Livestock and Agriculture. So all you sheep folks out there watching with us, thanks for joining. But please remember to join us on Tuesday as well, as we're going to be talking about those guidelines, things that have changed. We have great pictures and examples to show you. We also have lots of experts, just like Dr. Ramsey, who's going to be giving us the inside scoop of those classification guidelines and what to be prepared for when you're purchasing animals, so that there's no surprise when you get in the ring and get to the classifiers. So I want to remind you of that Tuesday, May 21 from 4 to 6 p.m. So Dr. Ramsey, thanks for your time. Let's wrap up today. You have any last minute thoughts?
Yeah, one other thing. Let those kids shear these lambs. These clippers are super safe. They're not going to cut themselves. They're not going to cut the lambs. That's how you learn. Let them get out there, go to some jackpot shows, teach those lambs how to stand on the stand, practice doing the boots. And that's one thing that the biggest mistake that I see when people shear, they do a decent job on the body, but they don't do anything on the boots and they don't do the head. And so it's a huge disadvantage if you don't do that. And when a judge comes in subconsciously, he doesn't want to take his picture with an ugly one, okay? And so make sure those lambs all look good. Like they're going out on a date, you want to make sure everything is right. Hey, we're glad you joined in. We look forward to seeing you next week. If you got questions, you can get a hold of me at sramsey.tamu.edu. Shoot me an email. We'll be glad to answer it, or contact me through Dottie. We hope this session helps you out on getting those lambs prepared for the show. See you next week.